Hi everyone, Connor from Concrete Character Sheet here, and today our build is going to be technically more of a dip. We'll be working with the Artificer, a class that's pretty difficult to multi-class because they get a lot of great, though complex features spread out across the levels that are all fairly balanced. However, I think this build can broaden our character's control and utility with a few wizard levels, while still giving us most of the good stuff from Artificer at levels that feel satisfying. We won't get the famous level 20 Artificer capstone, but if you can make a good multi-class, a level 20 ability isn't worth building for anyway, and I think we've got a good capstone regardless. To begin, we'll pick our race, the Tabaxi. There is a reason that we're a pretty kitty, as the Tabaxi's feline speed uniquely regenerates when we stay still, which we'll be doing quite often with our wizardly powers. Tabaxi gives several good features, 2 great skills, a climb speed, dark vision, and then cat's claws, which we'll never use. But we're here for feline agility, which doubles our movement speed on one turn, and we can reuse this as long as we stay still for a second turn. We'll talk more about this ability later, but this character has a lot of positioning needs, and this ability really helps with that. Note that the monsters of the multiverse Tabaxi can be small, but we'll want to be a medium creature for this build. For our background, we'll be a guild artisan, a woodsmith who is also an arcane artisan. We'll take woodcarver tools with our first level of Artificer, freeing us to swap out the artisan tools from our background with a musical instrument, namely the pan flute. Our hero started out as a magical instrument maker, but discovered we could channel magic through larger and larger cylinders. We'll be using a hollowed out piece of wood, like a bamboo shaft, as a wand to start off. We'll swap out some of the skills though, as usual. For our skill list, Tabaxi gives us the excellent perception and stealth, Artificer gives us Thieves' Tools, Tinkerer's Tools, and Woodcarver's Tools, and then a few intellect skills coming from the class itself. We'll pick up Arcana and Investigation. For our background skills, I think we'll be a learned individual. This character can fill some of the roles of a wizard in the party, so we'll take Nature and Religion, showing that we are a knowledgeable cat. Our stat line will reflect the fact that we'll be up close and personal, making AC and hit points a priority. We'll take 17 Intelligence, 16 Constitution, 14 Dexterity, 10 Wisdom, 8 Charisma, and 8 Strength. When we start at level 1, our Tabaxi artisan has undertaken a sabbatical from her guild in order to expand her understanding of the world, as well as her burgeoning magical inventions. With Constitution saving throws, medium armor, and a shield, she's no pushover. For starting cantrips, we'll need to take Firebolt. We want this on the Artificer list, rather than on the Wizard list for our Arcane Firearm later on. And Guidance, because unless someone else has Guidance cantrip, there's no replacement for this all-purpose skill booster. Artificers only get half their level rounded down, minimum 1, plus your intelligence modifier spells per day, so right now that's 4. Not a lot, but you can swap them out every day, which is huge, so I'll just be going over the highlights. By all means, change these out to suit your needs during a campaign. Cure Wounds is an exciting one, always nice to be able to heal. Expeditious Retreat, which hilariously stacks with our Tabaxi speed. Grease, Fairy Fire, Disguise Self, all great spells. Later on, you'll be glad to have Absorb Elements on this list. To start with, let's take Cure Wounds, Expeditious Retreat, Fairy Fire, and Grease. Swap out as needed, such as grabbing Detect Magic, though we'll solve that ritual issue later on as a wizard. Also, we get Magical Tinkering. Record things, emit a smell, take a picture, shed a little light. Great, no notes, fun little widgets. We advance to level 2, and we start getting infusions. The beauty of this build is that we will be using our action for spells and control that don't require us to have a fancy weapon, so by all means share your magic weapon with your party. I suggest Bag of Holding, Enhanced Defense, Enhanced Weapon or Repeating Shot or Returning Weapon, whichever your party prefers, and Alchemy Jug. I love Alchemy Jug, even if you don't use it that often. 8 gallons of water per day, or slick the floor with mayonnaise to help your barbarian friend push a statue, help your rogue get poison, share beer for the ship's crew, etc. Lots of roleplay potential, but enough water and calories, okay, living off of mayonnaise, ew, but still, to avoid starvation. Or if you're in the water-based campaigns out there, swap our Cap of Water Breathing for Enhanced Defense. Most often, you'll want to give your party members a magic weapon and have a Bag of Holding to start with. Side note, make sure your GM isn't going to gatekeep magic items just because you can make them. That would really suck. You'll be stuck using a class feature for the whole game to get a Bag of Holding, while the same GM would give a party a Bag of Holding if you weren't an Artificer. Just something to consider. At level 3, we finally become what we came for. We're an artillerist artificer. Our work on pipes and pipe organ tubes has come up with a magical bazooka of sorts, and you found that it can do a bunch of different things. So let's talk about the Eldritch Cannon. The cannon is a magical object you can create once for free and then spend a spell slot to make it again. We'll always use first level slots if we can. It lasts an hour and has 3 modes. Only use one at a time. The Protector mode deals out temporary hit points. Though not nearly as broken as the Twilight Cleric's hit point bubble, it's a very strong ability. It's actually a good argument if your party has no other temporary hit point providers to cast your Protector Cannon when you first enter a dungeon, or even when you first wake up, giving everyone several rounds to roll the highest amount of hit points. Even if you don't use the Protector mode for the rest of the day, those temporary hit points will last. The cannon also has a long-range attack, the Force Ballista, which includes a push with no roll required. There are absolutely 100% times when this is the best choice, combined with your Firebolt cantrip, particularly against flying enemies. Meanwhile, the Flamethrower option is what we use as often as possible, in hopes of hitting multiple targets and really spiking our damage output. For that, though, we'll want to take the Legs option and make the cannon small, so that it can move around the battlefield, or ideally, right on top of our beefy tank. Check with your GM, but this is both cool and should work for a high-strength, medium-sized character to serve as a mount of sorts to a small object. We also get the Shield spell attached to our spell list permanently, which is super handy for the melee situations we'll be getting into. Plus, we get another tool proficiency since we started out as a woodcarver, so let's grab Smith's tools. With our primary weapon in hand, we now have the chance to multiclass. Our arcane crafter, having created this strange tubular weapon, seeks greater arcane knowledge in the wizardly arts. She gets herself a spellbook and goes to town. Speaking of which, if you can go to town and buy a bunch of spell scrolls, a wizard dip gets even better. Even without that, Wizard 1. It's actually quite a level. We can recover a spell slot, one of those first level slots we use to summon our cannon, with a short rest. We get 3 cantrips and no less than 6 first level spells for our book, and another 4 level 1 spells a day, plus the ability to ritual cast without having the spell prepared. People underestimate Wizard 1, I think. That said, we'll be picking spells assuming we won't get scrolls or wizard spellbooks. If we do get those, then these picks don't super matter. Anyway, we also have 6 spell slots per day, a level early due to the way Artificer multiclassing rounds up for spell levels. For cantrips, we'll be picking up Mending for our cannon, Shocking Grasp to escape all the melee situations we'll be putting ourselves in, even though we won't be able to use our arcane firearm, and Mage Hand for pure utility. For first level spells in our book, let's load up on rituals. Detect Magic, Tensor's Floating Disc, Identify, Find Familiar, and Alarm. We'll also get Silent Image, Fog Cloud, Artificers don't usually get those, and Expeditious Retreat again, just because being fast will be something we'll want on both of our lists. At level 5, we'll take Wizard 2. This is the tricky spot where our peers get extra attack, but thankfully we also get to complete our build as we become an Enchanter Wizard. That said, first let's do spells. We had 2 more first level spells known. I'll pick up Comprehend Languages and Protect from Evil and Good. Again, hopefully we can get more spells from scrolls, but if not, we have 5 spells a day from our wizard and 4 spells a day from Artificer, plus all these rituals. But now, Enchantment! The Enchantment School gives us 1 key power, and we are building our character around it. Hypnotic Gaze lets you charm an enemy in melee, and if you succeed, they are incapacitated for as long as you want, as long as you spend your action every turn. That seems like a high cost, but this is an amazing effect for something that does not take our concentration, can be used once on each monster, and because we're an artillerist, we are still able to use our cannon each turn while we're locking someone down. Because we're a tabaxi with Expeditious Retreat, we won't have too much trouble getting within 5 feet, yet because we have medium armor, a shield, and the shield spell, we aren't too worried about being attacked. The only risk is if our enemy fails to save or is immune to charm, in which case we will push our enemy back with the Force Ballista if available, or use Shocking Grasp next turn to escape. From here we have the core of the build laid down. Instead of attacking with our cantrip like most artillerists, we are using our action to lock down a powerful boss or a strong mook, while still being able to concentrate on a spell and take impactful bonus actions. The question is, do we go for Wizard 3, which would give us a 2nd level spell, returned on our first short rest of the day, and give us access to the synergistic Dragon's Breath? Wouldn't it be cool to have a familiar on one shoulder with Dragon's Breath and your flamethrower cannon on the other? It would, but alas, you can find a fascinating build like Colby at D4 where he went for this, but I have to disagree. Much as I want this to work, the use of our familiar to blast with Dragon's Breath is unreliable at best, cheesy nonsense at worst. The GM would have every right to have all the enemies attack the familiar immediately when it first starts breathing, and we'd get one 3d6 cone out of a second level spell. If your GM considers your familiar to be safe if they're on your shoulder, or if the familiar can hide in your bag of holding, great, but we can't count on that. Also, all of this would delay our Artificer powers even more, but heading back to Artificer makes for a tighter build where we get fantastic powers at 11, 17, and 20, right where we should be getting those upgrades. With that in mind, we're level 6 and taking Artificer 4. We are going to raise our intelligence to 18, and while there are a few feats that add +1 to intelligence, I'm going to suggest Skill Expert, particularly if we're the team's replacement wizard. I'll add expertise to Arcana, and hey, let's pick up History for an all-around thinky character. Having more intelligence helps our cantrips, our turrets, save, and our hypnotic gaze, all of which we need. At level 7, we get Artificer 5, and like any half-caster, it's a big level for us as we gain access to second-level spells known, though oddly we get our third-level spell slots at the same time. We now have the Arcane Firearm, which lets us use our wand to increase our spell damage, but only for Artificer spells. That's why we made sure to take Firebolt as an Artificer, though since we found something else to do with our action, at least part of the time, delaying this bonus damage to our cantrip wasn't a huge loss. Though Arcane Firearm does mean we can use a wand for our casting Artificer spells, which means if you were previously having to do any switching between your wizard focus and your Artificer tools, you might be able to use the same wand for both. The rules on this aren't completely clear, but it's a fair thing to ask a GM in my opinion, that both classes can use the same wand. With our new second level spells and third level slots, we can take advantage of our wizard spells and built-in shield spell to move most of our Artificer spells known into second level spells, grabbing useful concentration spells each day like Invisibility, Levitate, Enhance Ability, Enlarge Reduce, or Web. Of those, I'm most interested in Web. Even at this level, it's worth using to restrain enemies, as we can cast the spell on turn 1 and then incapacitate another enemy, or one who escaped, on subsequent turns, using Hypnotic Gaze. Levitate can perform similar functions in certain circumstances, and is always a good utility spell. Also, our Scorching Ray and Shatter spells we have built in all benefit from the Arcane Firearm bonus, and Scorching Ray scales very well, so it's a great option to upcast into a third level slot. Moving right along, we take Artificer 6 at level 8, and we get more infusions, as well as tool expertise to beef up our tool usage. For our infusions, I strongly suggest picking up Repulsion Shield, replacing Enhanced Defense, and putting it on ourself. The Reaction Push gives us a way to use our reaction, and with careful positioning, enabled by our speed, perhaps we can push an enemy back into our web spell or off a cliff. The other item that fits our build is the Boots of the Winding Path. This would allow us extra safety when an enemy passes their save against Hypnotic Gaze. We run up with our cat speed, use our reaction for Hypnotic Gaze, and if the creature saves or is immune, we use Boots of the Winding Path as our bonus action to escape. If the creature fails the save, we can use our turret bonus action as normal. This is strictly optional depending on how many tanks your party has, but it's a good synergy. The other infusion we'll be taking is the Pipes of Haunting. Luckily for us, we know a thing or two about pan flutes, as this odd item requires wind instrument proficiency. This item has a lot going for it. An area of effect Fear in a huge 30-foot radius, a great DC for an item of this level at 15, 3 uses, no attunement, and no concentration. This adds another great control option that we can do while we're using our cannon, particularly if key enemies defeat our Hypnotic Gaze or Web Spell. And if you get to a point where too many enemies are immune to Fear, swap out this item later on. At level 9, we're an Artificer 7, and we get Flash of Genius. A simple, amazing ability that improves as we get more intelligence, and it uses our reaction, which isn't taken up often the way our action and bonus action are. Use it to help with crucial saves or concentration checks. We also want to swap our enhanced weapon out for the strictly better Radiant weapon, and then swap it back at Artificer level 10 when we get access to +2 weapon infusions. At level 10, we're an Artificer 8, and we get an ability score improvement to get +2 intelligence to get it to 20. This helps with pretty much everything we do, not to mention we now get 5 uses of Flash of Genius at an impressive +5 each. At level 11, at Artificer 9, we get a few big bumps in power right when our peers do. We've got a 4th level spell slot, and 3rd level spells known, our cantrip damage scales up, and our Eldritch Cannon gets a 50% damage buff from 2d8 to 3d8. Plus we get access to Fireball, boosted by our Arcane Firearm. Wind Wall isn't bad to have in our back pocket either. We only get 9 Artificer spells spread across 3 levels, but we have powerful options like Fly, Dispel Magic, Haste, Protection from Energy, and Revivify. Haste is particularly interesting to cast on ourselves, since we can use the Pipes of Haunting as part of the extra haste action, and haste gives us an unbelievable speed boost combined with feline agility. We do run the risk of losing the spell and then being unable to maintain our hypnotic gaze, so haste isn't a perfect solution, but it mixes well with our skill set and our high concentration save of +7, backed up by Flash of Genius. For level 12, we're an Artificer 10, and we get a singular feature, Magic Item Adept. Talk to your GM to see if you can craft uncommon magic items, because doing them in 25% of the time is nice, but since they often take months or years, it still might not fit into the campaign. Still, there are some strong uncommon items out there, so it's worth asking. But most importantly, we can now attune 4 magic items at once, allowing combinations I can only guess at based on what items might be in your campaign, supplemented by our infusion items. This feature is hard to quantify but undeniably powerful in most games, particularly if you can get an item to increase your Artificer or Wizard spell DC. We also get 2 more infusions, and we might swap back to Enhanced Defense or Enhanced Weapon to give our party members a +2 weapon. Our infusion options are pretty incredible. We might try Pipes of the Sewers, though it takes attunement, but definitely pick up the amazing Winged Boots. My other pick is the Gauntlets of Ogre Power. For a character, perhaps ourselves, who dump strength, this suddenly means we are much less likely to fail a host of athletics checks and strength saves, when our strength jumps from 8 to 19, though I must point out the hilarity of giving a headband of intellect to a party member with 8 intellect, such a fun role-playing opportunity. We move on to level 13, and we now get another big level, Artificer 11. We get a second 4th level spell slot, and our complicated but amazing ability, Spell Storing Item. There are so many things about this ability that you'll need to check with your GM about, so let's get to it. The rules are very clear that wizard familiars can take actions other than attack as normal, and an owl or eagle could clearly hold a wand, so there is no ambiguity at all that our familiar could use the spell storing item because holding it is the only requirement. The only question is whether familiars are smart enough to do so, but you can direct them telepathically, so. Next on the list, because spell storing item is not casting a spell, does it break invisibility? Arguably no, but expect your GM to overrule that. I probably would as a GM, honestly. Next is the spell storing item a silent cast because it's not casting a spell? Almost certainly yes, and that's really not too broken. Though since it isn't casting a spell, can you take a bonus action spell in the same turn? I think so. Can it be counterspelled? Not rules as written, and if the GM disagrees, remind them that just like the subtle spell metamagic, you can't counterspell what you don't see happening. Next, does using the item count as use an item? As written, it almost certainly does, and as confirmed by Jeremy Crawford, but if you have a thief rogue in your party, maybe the GM wants to change that. This also affects if a hasted target can use their extra haste action to use our spell storing item. Lastly, remember that the item can be passed around, and the person who uses the item is the one who concentrates, so you can have up to your 10 castings from the item per day coming from the rest of your party, your familiar, or any tiny servants you might summon. With that ridiculous housekeeping out of the way, what spells should we use for the spell storing item? This list is varied, but most importantly, you can change this every single day according to party need. If you can't think of anything, do Enhance Ability. It'll be immensely useful to almost anything your party is going to do in a day, advantage on any kind of ability check. Need extra health? 10 castings of Aid. 5 HP healed to 3 party members is strictly better than 10 castings of a level 1 Cure Wounds, and can be done from 30 feet. Need your familiar to be your artillery, Scorching Ray, or Shatter. Need the whole party to be invisible for an hour, Invisibility, and pass the spell storing item around. Need a 1-hour version of Seeming, pass around Disguise Self. Need to walk up the side of a sheer cliff, pass around Spider Climb or Levitate. Need to light your new castle, 10 castings of a component-free Continual Flame will do nicely. Need to lock every door in your castle, 10 castings of Arcane Lock for free. Need to enlarge your team or shrink doors, enlarge Reduce. Your party needs advantage, Fairy Fire, or the most combat relevant for our build, how about Web? Just lots of castings of Web, preferably coming from our bird familiar 60 feet in the air with no indication that the familiar is the source of the web. You get the idea. This feature, even 2 levels late, is absolutely stellar and very much open to imaginative plays. Choose your item carefully every morning and your party will be very impressed with the results. Okay, back on track, we're going to level 14 and Artificer 12. We're going to use our ability score improvement to get the Warcaster feat for 2 reasons. We want the advantage on concentration saves since we're often in close quarters, and also the chance, even the rare chance, to cast a spell with our reaction is very welcome since we'll often be using Hypnotic Gaze with our action. Extra points if someone in the party can cast Dissonant Whispers to provoke opportunity attacks. Level 15, Artificer 13, we have access to 5th level spell slots and 4th level spells. I do love how that syncs up. Artificers don't get too many amazing spells on their 4th and 5th level spell lists, but Autoluke's Resilient Sphere, Stone Shape, Freedom of Movement, and in some cases Arcane Eye or Fabricate can be useful. Having Ice Storm and Wall of Fire always ready isn't bad, since they'll benefit from our firearm bonus at least. That said, I'll actually take Summon Construct as much as possible, because it doesn't take our bonus action, and it adds more control options to the battlefield. This is assuming we have outsourced our castings of Web to our familiar. The Metal Construct I think scales the best for this level, as it gives enemies 1d10 damage whenever it's attacked, not just 1 attack total the way Clay Construct does, which is good since many enemies have multi-attack by this point in the game. At level 16 we get Artificer 14, with the feature Magic Item Savant. We get a 5th magic item to attune to, which is again hard to quantify, but even more so we can now use magic items and ignore race, class, spell, and level requirements. This is extremely campaign dependent, but can buff your versatility or your power immensely. I can't tell you how to use this ability because I don't know what items you've found, but if your GM is generous with magic items or likes class restricted items, well, this ability is going to be hilarious. We also get 2 more infusions and access to our most powerful item list at this level. Swap the Gauntlets of Overpower for the Belt of Hill Giant Strength. Then, take the Amulet of Health and give your squishy caster a bunch more health. And if you can spare the Attunement slot, activated Boots of Speed can mix with Feline Agility and Expeditious Retreat or Haste to make some ridiculous movement combinations if all you do is dash, clocking in at somewhere between 41 and 82 miles per hour for a round. Seems fine. At level 17, we're an Artificer 15, and right on time we get our big damage bump to compete with our wish casting peers. Our cantrip damage goes up, and the fortified position feature we get now was a big reason to stay artillerist. We now have 2 cannons, and each one gives half cover. Cover doesn't come up a lot in most games, so that means for most party members who are near or carrying your cannons, this is just plus 2 AC that stacks with almost everything. We've doubled our damage, though by this point enemies may be immune or resistant to fire, but forced ballistas are still great, and added a big buff to our martial character friends. This ability is pretty simple, but much appreciated. At level 18, we get Artificer 16, giving us our first feat that isn't just a foregone conclusion. If your party plays with the common house rule that your familiar goes on or after your turn, the Alert feat is great. Tough, plus 2 to Constitution, maybe Elemental Adept Fire, but it won't help your turrets. Resilient Wisdom is probably the most powerful, but I'd actually suggest Lucky to get the most out of our Hypnotic Gaze, though a fair number of enemies at this level will be immune. Really, there are no bad options here. At level 19, we're an Artificer 17, we get a 6th level spell slot that normal Artificers can only dream of, plus 5th level spells. Probably we will use our 6th level slot to upcast Summon Construct to give it more HP, damage, and 3 attacks rather than 2. We get the Wide Radius Cone of Cold spell, and the excellent Wall of Force spell prepared, which even at this level is not unwelcome. Our 5th level list does have some standouts. If there's Rock in your campaign, Transmute Rock is surprisingly good and non-concentration. The rest of the list doesn't do much. We don't have the bonus action to spare for animate objects, and I consider it something of an eye roll spell that will just frustrate players and GMs alike. Really, nothing else on our list compares with Wall of Force, but even if that's all we cast at 5th level, it'll be worth it. At level 20, we've arrived, and we're an Artificer 18. Sure, we miss out on Soul of Artifice, but our capstone is still excellent. We get to attune a 6th magic item, and we get 2 more infusions. I don't have many clever recommendations. Pick what your party needs, or what's fun. You're level 20, Dimensional Shackles, Gem of Seeing, Cloak of the Bat, whichever. but the combos you can make with 6 magic item attunement slots, it'll be good, don't worry. And that's all we've got. Artificers are complex, and you do have to wrap your mind around them. But once you get there, the options are quite impressive. I'm very happy with this build. I think we've really built on the Artificer's strengths without adding any new weaknesses to speak of. We've got way more rituals, a whole new control method for our main action, and satisfying things to do with our bonus action and reaction. On paper, Artificers don't compete with full-class spellcasters, but in play, handing out magic items and being able to equip more magic items yourself could really bridge that gap. What's your favorite spell to use with spell storing item? Folks who've played Artificers to high levels, what combination of magic items could you make that only worked on an Artificer? Help fill in the blanks, and it'll encourage newbies to try this wacky class. And with that, I encourage you to like and subscribe. It really helps me out, and I'll see you all next week. Remember, just because you can run 82 miles per hour doesn't always mean that you should.